You know that classic image of a Roman legionary, right? The armor, the discipline, the sheer might of an empire, all wrapped up in one soldier. But behind that iconic look of steel and leather, there's a financial reality that we hardly ever talk about. A reality of debt, of deductions, and honestly, a constant struggle just to make ends meet. So let's peel back the curtain and uncover what it really cost to be a soldier for Rome.
So you gotta ask the most basic question, right? An army needs its gear, the swords, the shields, the whole shebang. Where did it all come from? Was it just handed out by a grateful empire? Well, the answer, it might just surprise you.
Yup, you heard that right. For a huge chunk of Roman history, the very men fighting and dying for the empire were also footing the bill for their own life-saving equipment. This was no perk of the job. It was the first and usually the biggest expense that got yanked right out of their salary.
Now, to be fair, this system wasn't always set in stone. It actually changed a lot over Rome's very long history, and those changes really tell a story about the empire's own fortunes and its military needs.
So way back in the early Republic, it was all about your personal wealth. The richer you were, the better your armor. Simple as that. Then, the famous Marian reforms in 107 BC totally changed the game. Suddenly, you have a professional army with standardized gear. But here's the catch. The state supplied it, sure, but the cost was deducted from your pay. And that's the system from the High Empire that we're going to focus on today. It actually wasn't until the massive economic crises of the 3rd century that a pretty desperate state finally started paying for everything.
All right, so if you're a soldier back in the 2nd century AD and you have to buy your own kit, what does that shopping trip even look like? Let's break it down item by item. It's time to go shopping, Roman legionary style.
Okay, first up, the most iconic weapon of them all, the gladius. This short, stabbing sword was a legionary's best friend in the absolute chaos of close-quarters combat. But this essential tool, it wasn't free. A good, standard-issue gladius was going to set him back about 15 denarii. Now, to really get what that means, you need to know that a legionary's annual salary at the time was around 300 denarii. So his sword, the single most important tool for his survival, cost him 5% of his entire yearly pay before he'd even seen a single coin of it.
Next on the list, the pilum. This was that heavy javelin designed to just punch through enemy shields and completely mess up their formations. A legionary would carry 2 of these into a fight. The good news? These were a bit more affordable, with a pair costing him around 4 denarii.
So, while they were absolutely crucial for that devastating opening volley, the javelins were, a more manageable expense. At less than 1.5% of his annual pay, they were a key part of his arsenal, but not a financially crippling one. And now for the big ticket item, the lorica segmentata. This segmented plate armor was a true marvel of Roman engineering, giving incredible protection while still being flexible. But boy, did this advanced tech come with a hefty price tag. We're talking anywhere from 50 to 60 denarii. Just let that sink in for a second. Nearly a fifth of his entire year's gross pay was spent on his armor alone. Before he paid for food, before he sent money home, before anything else, he was making a massive personal investment just to stay alive on the battlefield.
And the costs just keep piling up. We can't forget the scutum, that huge curved shield that was basically the cornerstone of the famous Roman testudo, or tortoise, formation. This defensive beast was just as vital as his sword, and it cost about the same, another 15 denarii.
And there goes another 5% of his annual pay. It's kind of fascinating when you think about it. His main offensive weapon, the gladius, and his main defensive tool, the scutum, were an equal financial commitment. Offense and defense really did come at the same price. Finally, to protect his head, you've got the galea, or the helmet. A sturdy bronze or iron helmet with those protective cheek guards was absolutely essential to surviving the madness of battle. This critical piece of protection would cost him about 10 denarii. So while it wasn't as pricey as the armor, it was yet another necessary deduction, chipping away about 3% of his salary. As you can see, every single piece, from his head to his hands, came with a price tag, and boy did it all add up. Wow. Seeing it all laid out here really puts it into perspective. The armor is, by far, the biggest chunk, just eating up a fifth of his pay right off the bat. Then you have the sword and shield, his bread and butter, costing another 10% combined. The total investment just to be considered battle-ready was just enormous. Okay, so at this point, you're probably asking a very fair question. How in the world do we know these numbers? It's not like a Roman quartermaster left behind a convenient little price list for us, right? Well, the answer is it's more like historical detective work. What we're looking at are really well-informed estimates. Historians are piecing together clues from all over the place. They look at military writers like Vegetatius, who described the gear. They look at later economic documents like Diocletian's big edict on maximum prices, which gives us a sense of costs. And they even do archaeological analysis on recovered items to estimate the cost of materials and labor. It's a giant puzzle. And this right here is why maintenance was everything. This wasn't just about military discipline, it was about financial survival. If you lost your sword on campaign or your shield got smashed beyond repair, guess what? You were buying it all over again, out of your own pocket. Taking care of your gear wasn't just a duty, it was maybe the most important financial skill you could have. So let's add it all up. Let's do the final math and see what the bottom line really looks like for a brand new recruit walking in to join the legions. When you tally it all up, the sword, javelins, armor, shield, and helmet, the basic kit cost well over 100 denarii. For new recruit, this was a staggering amount of debt to take on. He was literally starting his career deep in the red. And here's what it all comes down to. This chart says it all. About a third, 1/3 of a legionary's gross annual pay was just gone before he ever saw it. That 300 denarii salary might sound pretty good, but after paying for the very tools of his trade, not to mention food and other deductions, his actual take-home pay was a tiny fraction of that headline number. Which, of course, brings us to our final question. When you factor in this massive cost of equipment, on top of all the other deductions for food and supplies, was a 25-year career in the Legion really a path to prosperity? Or was the price of glory a lot steeper than we think? That's definitely something to chew on.